We raising the next generation of gangsters. It's important that everybody who works for us understands that not only do these children have to be protected at all times, but they've also been empowered to protect themselves. So part of protecting them includes protecting their secrets. This is Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition, Genesis, bonus episode 3, part 2. When we left off in part 1 of bonus episode 3, we knew everything that there was to know about the plots and situations that were going on in the five families. Everything except for the situation with Simone. And what exactly happened in that elevator with Beyonce, Jay-Z, and Solange? I mean, in that staircase with Michael, Melissa, and Tamara. Hugh had gotten the 411 from his son and his daughter, and he told Angela everything except what Michael and Tamara went to that staircase to do. And she was fit to be tied. She said, I told that boy to be a gentleman. I told him to keep his body parts to himself. Q said he was a gentleman. Angela said, then why won't you tell me what happened? And why won't you let me ask him? Q said, because you're doing too much, love. We can model, teach, guide, but we can't force. And the last thing I want to do is break his confidence. He trusted me enough to tell me the truth. I want to keep it that way. He and Melissa are both grounded. He knows exactly what he did wrong. And once we're done with the round table, I'm going to follow back up with him on just how serious he is with this girl. I'll encourage him to talk to you. And if he does, you got to stay cool. Do more listening than talking. And remember that the goal is to encourage him to talk to you again. That ain't going to happen if you flipping out, love. So at the round table, Q skipped completely over what Michael and Tamara were doing in the staircase and focused on how they got out of the staircase, uninjured, alive, and of their own free will. He said, when everybody was seeing Michael and Tamara off, Melissa was outside with Karma. She begged us not to let Michael go to the dance. When that didn't work, she asked if Solomon could be a part of his transport crew. Solomon was Melissa's personal guard. He'd been assigned to her for years. He was the same guard that she and Michael had tricked in Miami on the yacht during Selima and Wise's wedding. They trapped him inside their rooms on the yacht, got off the boat, and jumped into a rental car that Michael had booked in Donovan's name. That was how Melissa had saved Maribel from Jeff's crazy behind. He was a Lopez soldier, and when Manny attempted to reprimand him, Melissa had thrown a complete and total fit. He loved Solomon, and it was clear that he loved the little girl too. When men tried to abduct her at her spiritual school in North Carolina, where she was a boarding student, Solomon was off duty, but he'd worked tirelessly to help find Melissa. The man was running on fumes. He wouldn't sleep. He didn't eat. He ran down every lead. In fact, he was the one who identified the gardener as the suspect. It was clear that he was one way about Melissa. So Solomon had kept his job and was still in position as Melissa's personal security. And Q agreed to put him on Michael's transport team, with the understanding that Melissa would let it go and let God. But clearly she hadn't. She was up to something. She taught Karma how to get in the trunk. Not how to open it. That would be virtually impossible. But how to get in one when it was opened. She knew that her personal guard, just like any other security, would check the trunk of the car before he drove off. And hiding in trunks was not new to Melissa. She'd done it on the day that Pops Andy had his heart attack in the park, when he and the Queen Mother had gone to confront his ex-girlfriend, India. Just like every other time she'd inserted herself in a situation, God had given her the tap that things were going to go wrong. Q discovered her in the trunk of the car that he was driving right before shots rang out. Clearly, that harrowing experience was not a deterrent. Because when Solomon opened the trunk of his assigned vehicle, Melissa gave Karma the signal, and Karma ran and jumped in the trunk. Despite Solomon's best efforts, he couldn't get that dog out of that trunk. And Melissa ran up, all innocent, saying, oh my goodness, that's what she is. I've been looking for her. Just get in the car, Solomon. I'll get her out. Solomon walked to the car, got in, saw the trunk close, and drove off, assuming that Melissa closed the trunk after she'd gotten Karma out. He had no idea that she'd gotten in. Everyone who had a role in Operation Young Love knew the layout of the school building where the dance was being held and the entire property, just in case there needed to be a change in roles or something occurred that necessitated the soldiers moving around the property. So when Solomon got the call that he needed to be positioned at the top of that staircase by that back door, it was nothing for him to jump in. He grabbed what he needed and got in position. And he was the guard who came down the stairs, out the back door, found the guard who was stationed at the back door dead. Melissa holding a goon at gun and Karma point. And that was why it was so easy for Melissa to give him instructions and for him to go along with them. He knew Melissa, so he knew that if she'd gone through all of that, she knew something he didn't. She had a plan, and it was probably going to work. Remember, he had no idea that Michael and Tamara were in that staircase. And by the time the call came that they were no longer in the ballroom, he was already in the car with his dead coworker and the tied up and gagged goon. And it wasn't much longer before the fire alarm went off and Melissa and Karma came running out of that back door. She opened the trunk, Karma jumped in, she jumped in, closed the trunk, and yelled from the back, "Go!" So he did, right to the rendezvous point. When he arrived, he turned over his dead comrade and the goon. And while Melissa had sworn him to secrecy, he pointed at the trunk and mouthed to Q, and Q just shook his head and said, "Take her home." At home, while Angela had a whole lot going on, she was not derelict in her duties as a mother. Angel told her that Melissa wasn't coming down for dinner. She'd gone up to Melissa's room, saw that she wasn't there, and looked out the windows to see if Melissa and Karma were out in the grassy area. When she didn't spot them, she checked the cameras in the common areas of her home, checked the private areas, and then called Marley. Melissa had not taken her necklace off. Marley tracked it and told Angela, "Don't worry about it. I got it." Reviewed the cameras outside of Q and Angela's house and saw when Melissa and Karma got in the trunk of Solomon's assigned vehicle. Then he informed the Queen Mother, who said, "Marley, I don't think you ever gonna be able to retire, because these grandkids of mine gonna need you." When the Queen Mother arrived at Q and Angela's house to find out what happened with Miss Bernie, she didn't tell Angela where Melissa was, but she did reassure her that Melissa was fine. And she was there when Solomon showed up at the front door with Melissa and Karma in tow. When Angela asked Melissa, "Where have you been, young lady?" Melissa said, "Oh, me and Karma was saving the day. We was the secret weapon." Angela said, "I got your secret weapon. Carry your tail up them stairs into your room. And don't bring your behind out again until I tell you to. You too, Karma." And Melissa and Karma both slunk up the stairs because they both knew they was in big trouble. Now, Solomon had no idea what had actually transpired inside the school while he was getting the car and putting them in it. But after he dropped Melissa at home, he returned to the rendezvous spot. He told Q everything, and Q dismissed him for the evening after telling him, "If anybody asked, my daughter was never there." So when Ezra gave his debrief at the round table, he couldn't account for Solomon's side of the story, but he was fully aware that Q could. And when Q ran it down, the other heads didn't know whether they should laugh or cry. The school grounds had been covered in armed, trained security. And it took a cane corso and a 14, almost 15-year-old girl to literally save the day. According to Michael, Melissa, in the surveillance video that Lorenzo had downloaded showed Q and then erased, Michael and Tamara were hiding on the steps of the lower level staircase. Man had crept up the stairs from the basement and grabbed Tamara from behind and started pulling her down the stairs before Michael could react. At the same time, the back door crept open and Melissa said, "Find him." Karma took off. She leaped down the stairs and jumped the goon, who released Tamara so that he could pull his firearm. He dropped the gun when Karma bit down on his arm, and then she tore him to pieces. Unfortunately, at that same moment, a second goon had come down from the second floor of the building. He was only seconds behind Karma, and when Melissa heard him coming, she ducked down into the shadows and pulled the baby 380 that her Uncle Donovan had given her before she went off to school. Right next to Melissa's head was a fire pole. When she popped up, the goon turned to look at her. She pulled the fire alarm and let off one shot, just as he raised his pistol. The sound of the fire alarm had muffled the gunshot for everybody else in the building, but not for Michael. While Karma was tearing the goon to pieces, he was pulling his 357, grabbing Tamara and pulling her back up the stairs. He had the 357 pointed at the goon, but when he heard the fire alarm and the gunshot, he spent around, just in time to see the second goon stagger and adjust to re-aim at Melissa. He had no idea who he was actually aiming at, but he'd assumed it was Melissa. So he let a shot off before the goon could, and that shot took him down. Melissa called Karma. Michael and Tamara ran out of the staircase and down the hall. Melissa and Karma ran out of the back door, jumped in the trunk of Solomon's car, and Michael reholstered his gun while telling Tamara, "You didn't see nothing, you didn't hear nothing, because nothing happened." And Tamara said, "I ain't hear or see nothing where? I don't know what you're talking about." As she ran for her life, they ran smack dab into a guard who was looking for them, and he ushered them out of the front door and into the waiting SUV that transported them to the rendezvous spot. When Q was finished giving his update, Catherine said, "We're raising the next generation of gangsters. It's important that everybody who works for us understands that not only do these children have to be protected at all times, but they've also been empowered to protect themselves. So part of protecting them includes protecting their secrets. The same way we don't answer to our employees, neither do the children." Q said, "My point exactly." Catherine asked, "So what did you decide to do with that soldier who was questioning Michael and Tamara?" Q said, "I left that decision up to Ezra." When Ezra said that the soldier's family had been notified that he lost his life in the field, Catherine asked, "Did you tell them that we'll cover the services and make sure that they're good for the foreseeable future?" Ezra said, I did. Catherine said, good. And Solomon, Angela said, I spoke with him myself. At this point, he's more upset than I am. But he's going to have to be replaced. He's entirely too close to Melissa. That ruse only worked because he let his guard down. Again. When that trunk closed, all he had to do was look around. He would have saw that Melissa and Karma weren't walking away from the vehicle. But he didn't. He trusted her. Plus, the other vehicles were in motion and he was trying to catch up. The Queen Mother said, he's too comfortable overall. Being in any position for too long will result in mistakes. So you give him some time to train his replacement, but don't move him until all of this is over. Then Manny agreed to identify someone appropriate to replace Solomon in the coming days. And Catherine gave her debrief on Simone's abduction. After law enforcement found the patrol car abandoned, dusted it for prints and didn't find any. Then found the patrol officer tied up in the woods. They immediately tried to contact Simone. They also went back to the restaurant. And without the surveillance footage, they couldn't prove that she'd gotten in that vehicle. They were suspicious and trying to get in contact with Simone, but they didn't think she was missing. They thought she was hiding. He was going to need to use his connections in the feds to get law enforcement off Simone's back. And Sincere was going to need to be seen in Miami looking for his sister. There were only a few reasons why someone would snatch Simone. To get information that they could use to get at the family, or to hurt someone in the family. Only way they'd actually be able to do that would be if they made contact with someone in the family. And Sincere would be the obvious mark. All of Catherine's digging hadn't resulted in much. She knew for sure that whomever had snatched Simone wasn't connected to the mercenaries in Texas, the Jamaicans in New York. So the traffickers had to have enlisted the services of yet another criminal organization. Manny was going to have to head to Miami, call a meeting with all of the Five Families' allies. Let them know that the families were at war, and have them make it clear to all of their allies that any organizations aligning themselves with the international trafficking organization would be making themselves enemies of the Five Families. Their allies were going to have to choose sides. They were going to have to tell Manny in no uncertain terms where they stood. So when the round table was over, Manny was heading to Miami, to the Underground, a private members-only club on an island off the coast of Miami where bosses and higher-ups in the criminal underworld are safe to meet, negotiate, and entertain themselves with food, drink, music, girls, and other entertainment. Their membership fees include security, lodging, and transportation to and from and around the island. The entire island is neutral grounds where no violence is allowed, big business is handled, and big money is spent. Sincere and Catherine would be going with Manny, because to that point, Nigel's 5 children's identities had been kept completely in-house. If the International Trafficking Organization was following Sincere and had snatched Simone, that meant that Stanley had told them about Nigel's children, and it was highly likely that others in the criminal underworld knew about them too. So Catherine needed to know who knew what and how. She'd already racked her brain and realized that when the families were at her home, Stanley had arrived during the memorial service. That meant he would have seen Sincere, Saint, Simone, Chantal, and Star. But he wouldn't have been back at the family home when she'd made the introductions. And by the time the larger group had arrived, only Sincere, Simone, and Chantal was still present. Because Stephanie and Rennie had kicked Star and Simone's behinds. Saint had removed Star. Sincere was keeping an eye on Simone, and Simone had remained to make sure that her sister Chantal was good. Catherine hadn't explained to the larger group who those 3 new faces were. And after questioning the family, she discovered that none of them had discussed it with anyone either. Without an explanation and only seeing the 5 children briefly during the memorial service, it was very well possible that Stanley wouldn't have realized that Saint was one of Nigel's children because he looked more like his mother. He also may not have realized that Nigel had triplet identical daughters because Star's dramatic behind was wearing a dark veil, so her face was hidden. Depending on what she learned in Miami, she had a plan brewing. While the round table was wrapping up, 2 things were happening. Star was starting her date in New York with Taryn, and Natalia was relocating to her temporary home, awaiting the arrival of her mother and waiting for her sister Courtney to show up. In New York, Taryn had picked up Star. They'd gone to New Jersey, and he'd taken her to Short Hills Mall, a mall that specializes in designer, and let her shop until she dropped. When they were done, he took her back to the chateau, an upscale hotel walking distance from the mall. The hotel was beautiful, but Star had seen better. She pretended like she hadn't, though. And when they got to the room, she walked all around, commenting on the beauty and amenities. And when Taryn said, go ahead and shower and put on something nice so we can head out to dinner, Star said, wait a minute, we sharing this room? Oh no, Playboy, don't get down like that. I do not know you well enough for all that. I'm gonna need my own room. Taryn chuckled and said, no problem. He walked out of the room and Star quickly started placing recording devices all around the room. When he returned, his guard started rolling his bags out of the room. Star was kicking herself. She should have guessed that he was going to let her keep that room and get himself another room. But no worries. She had a plan for that. He left her with the key. She jumped in the shower, put on something nice, and was standing in the hall when he came back. She wanted to see exactly what room he was coming from. Then Taryn took Star to Root's Steakhouse, where they had a fabulous dinner. The upscale restaurant was exquisite, and Star played the role of a 21-year-old girl, sufficiently impressed. She'd asked Taryn all about himself and shared all of the pretend details about her own life. And when they were done with the meal, they took a walk around Greenwood Gardens and talked some more. Star made sure to act like the typical 21-year-old college student. She got pictures and video of everything. She also recorded a lot of what Taryn said, because he didn't miss the opportunity to brag about his houses and cars. And when the night was over, Taryn took her back to the hotel, saying that he had some things he needed to do. At her door, she watched him walk back to his. She quickly went inside, snatched off her clothes, threw on her robe, opened up her bags, and then ran out of the room, straight to Terrence. She beat on his door, and when he opened it, she was in a frenzy. She said, "Oh my God, I think somebody's in my room." Terrence said, "What? Why you think that?" Star said, "Because my stuff isn't the way that I left it, and I think I heard a sound in the bathroom. You gotta go and check." Terrence said, "Calm down. I'll call security." Star said, "They might get away." Taryn, wanting her to calm down and not having time for her shenanigans, decided that he'd just go and check. He already knew that nobody was in this girl's room. While they were gone, he had security go in her room and look through her stuff just to verify that everything was on the up and up. He could never be too careful. He didn't have any reason to believe that she was a spy or some kind of mercenary. But there was no way he was spending the night with a young lady without taking this very necessary precaution. And even though they had separate rooms, he certainly planned to come back after he handled his business, take her down to the restaurant bar, get some liquor in her, and see if he could get her back to that room. But he needed to make sure that she wasn't going to double-cross him. So he went back to the room and did a customary check. He was going to have to holler at his boys about being better snoops, because there was no way in the world this young girl was supposed to be able to tell that they'd been there. Of course, he had no clue that she had placed the recording devices in the room. So she'd been alerted when they'd entered the room and searched it. And they clearly didn't do a good enough job, because she definitely come with the tools of her trade. She'd just hidden them very well and had some of them on her person when she'd gone with him to dinner and for that walk in the garden. While Taryn was looking around her room, she was placing recording devices in his. And by the time he returned, she was peeking out of his door like she was really scared. He grabbed her and pulled her to him and said, "I don't know what you thought you heard, but there was absolutely nobody in there. And if my line of business scares you that much, maybe you should go ahead and get dressed, collect your things, and let my guards take you back home. Because I don't want to see you scared like this." Star said, "I'm having fun, but I could have sworn I heard something. I know I'm not losing my mind. When you came back to get me, I had forgotten my earrings. I put my suitcase on that little suitcase holder, grabbed them, and left it unzipped. At least I think I did. Because when I came back, it was zipped up. Between that and whatever I heard in that bathroom, I was spooked." Taryn said, "I understand, and I'm glad that you're an observant young lady. The last thing I need in this line of business is a woman on my arms who doesn't know how to keep her head on a swivel and her eyes wide open. So I appreciate your due diligence. If you're comfortable, I'd really like for you to stay. When I finish handling my business, I'd like to go down to the bar, sit, talk, have some drinks. They got a band that plays on Saturday nights." Star said, "That's fine. We could do that." Taryn kissed Eve on the forehead and walked her back to her room. Meanwhile, in Dallas, Natalia had fallen asleep after unpacking as much of her stuff as she could, talking with her mother and having dinner. And she was woken up when security opened the door to let her sister Courtney in. And Courtney had blown in like a tornado. She came in rapid-fire Spanish. "Oh my God, Mommy, I missed you." "What up, sis? I'm sorry I didn't come earlier to help you unpack, but I was busy as hell. I had a little date last night, and it was a long night." Natalia just smiled. As she suspected, her sister was going to come in with a story about a dude and a date that resulted in her being unreliable yet again. Natalia asked, "So you had a date last night, and it lasted till just now?" Courtney said, "Of course not. It was a dinner date, and afterwards, things got a little hectic." Eugenia asked her daughter, "Was the date with the man that you told your father about?" Courtney said, "Nah, it was another dude." And Eugenia and Natalia just rolled their eyes. Courtney had said she met a dude who she was all into. And now she was saying she had a date with a completely different dude that lasted into the wee hours of the night, from the sounds of it. Before Natalia could ask her sister anything else, Courtney said, "Now, you know I don't like y'all all in my business like that. Long story short, it was a long night. I was tired. I overslept. I'm in town because I had work. So by the time I woke up, I had to submit my reports. I lost track of time. Then I was starving. So I had to find something good to eat. Next thing I know, I ended up at the mall and had to do a little retail therapy. And I won't be here long because I got plans tonight too. But I promise, I'm all yours tomorrow." Natalia wanted to ask her sister so bad if she was the covert operative that the Lopez family had sent in to pretend to be her during her date Friday evening with Sincere. And if that was the date she was referring to, but she knew what it was. Her sister was the covert operative. She couldn't tell her. And she certainly couldn't ask her with her mother in earshot. Not to mention, she was already blowing back out. And Natalia had been rejuvenated from her nap. She'd woken up just in time to get ready to head out. Both of the sisters had plans that evening. She told her mother that she was going to hit the showers. Mother said, I don't want you girls burning the candle at both ends. Please be careful. And take your time with these men. And in unison, Courtney and Natalia both said, I ain't say my plans was with a man. And Eugenia just smirked.